This episode is brought to you by Lumina Growth Lab. At Lumina, we help professional learning and development consultants who are struggling with steady lead flow, consistent bottom line revenue, and scalability, so they can finally have healthy margins, make more strategic decisions, and ultimately take their business to the next level. Most of the time, our clients come to us frustrated because nothing seems to work outside of word of mouth and referral-based growth. But with the right strategy and support, they're able to confidently add new channels of lead generation that create sustainable revenue and year-over-year growth for cheaper than ever before because of the use of AI technologies. If that sounds like you or someone you know, connect with me on LinkedIn and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about unlocking your business's potential. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Marketing Matrix. I'm your host, Lisanne Murphy, and today I am joined by the incredible and talented Bryon Morrison. Bryon, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lisanne.
Man, guys, you are in for a treat. Bryon has personality out the wazoo, and so I'm really excited for him to rain it down for you guys. Let me take just a moment to introduce this powerhouse of a man. So Bryon Morrison is the co-founder and CEO of Proxy, where he helps businesses prepare for exits, build strong operating systems, and scale without chaos. His background includes launching and exiting multiple startups, leading digital agencies at Omnicom, and serving on several company boards. He also teaches strategic promotion management at SMU and is the creator and host of the Leaders List Show, a bi-monthly podcast designed for SMB leaders who want clarity in how they grow, scale, and lead. Awesome. Okay, guys, so that is just the tip of the iceberg of all that Bryon has to share and offer for us today. So again, Bryon, thanks so much for showing up on the Marketing Matrix, and we're excited to hear from you.
Yeah, you made that almost impossible to live up to. I love it.
That's the goal of any bio, right? Is like you hear it and you're like, whoa, that's me? Oh my gosh. No, keep going. So for those that aren't as familiar with you, like share a little bit of your background in terms of how you got to the place you are with Proxy in terms of helping exits, right? There obviously had to be some experience that led up to that, right? So how did you get to where you are with Proxy?
Yeah, as with most entrepreneurs, you see something that's broken and it drives you nuts, but and you just have to fix it. And it's a calling. And that's kind of been my whole career. I started out in advertising and marketing and media and worked through a lot of different companies, saw business from lots and lots of different angles. I was very lucky to be able to start my own firms, and live through the dot-com, change and ran companies through mobile and social introduction. So I've seen massive, massive change and shift in business. I got to a point where I knew that I loved working with small to medium-sized businesses. I didn't necessarily want to work in Fortune 500. I loved that too, had great, experiences in it. But I often felt like I was throwing a pebble into the ocean. Like the ripple effect was not as great as when I would work with a company that was smaller. We could make massive change and we could see it happen overnight. And I just got hooked on that. And so Proxy was just the culmination of seeing business from a lot of different angles, having some success, and being able to get to a position where I want to be able to help founders, CEOs, top executives avoid some of the challenges that are common, but difficult to see when you can't see the forest from the trees.
I love that. So, and I've experienced that too. Like, I mean, it's a little bit riskier going with smaller businesses, but like when you see change, it's very fast and like they have so much more like gratitude, right? Because like you're like helping their dreams come true. That's like something I've experienced in my own agency is like, I think that's the most fulfilling is when someone's like, oh, I never thought that this could happen for me. Like, thank you so much. Whereas like in Fortune 500, it's like, yeah, like millions here, millions there. Like, yeah, like as long as our stock looks good, you know?
It's funny that you said that about risk. And of course there is risk, but I think there's actually less risk in working with SMBs because if you're good at what you're doing, they are going to expand, they're going to scale. They are like big corporations, they're just as suspect and prone to risk as small companies. It's just the difference is one goes away and one completely stops. Either way, you're not doing business with them anymore. So I found that working with SMBs, like we have some great success with the clients that we work with. They keep scaling, growing, and so it's actually easier to stay connected with them.
I love that. I love that. And it's a great perspective, and I appreciate the reframing of the risk involved for sure. What do you like what from your experience like do like what do you feel is like the big missing piece? Like is it that these founders they do want to exit but they have no idea, or like exiting necessarily isn't even on their radar and you come in and you're like, look, like there's a huge opportunity to have massive leverage like by setting up your company in a scalable manner with like a high EBITDA so that they can exit? Like what do you feel is like some of the missing pieces that really makes your service with Proxy super valuable?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. We don't start with, hey, are you going to exit? First of all, we already know everybody exits one way or another, right? Either on your feet or on your back. So, but a lot of companies are in their business. They don't necessarily want to exit. Like as an example, I have no desire to sell Proxy. I love what I do every day and I want to keep improving and getting better at it. But I want to have a company that's worth buying. And so what we really focus on, I think the big challenge that most SMB leaders run into is this concept of the execution gap, right? It's that challenge of how do I go from, possibilities and ideas to proof. And strategy execution, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that most executives that we work with run into. And so there's lots of different reasons for it. But where we focus is how do we start where they're at? We do not believe that there's one solution that fits all. We do know what are the repeated challenges that tend to happen. And so we're able to bring best practices. We're able to help those organizations make massive change. But then to answer your second question, when they start thinking about exiting, we do have a structured way of doing that and thinking about that. So it's all about pre-due diligence. And the focus that we have is before you end up at the, at the negotiation table, you're going to get offers. If you have a good business, somebody's going to call you and say, you ever thought about selling? And the question is like, instead of somebody dragging you through that process, how do you start to think ahead so you are prepared when opportunity knocks, you can answer the door?
I love that. I love that. So, what have you found? Are you preparing them in terms of like having the necessary elements in place, like solid client acquisition systems and operations, and that like it's not based on the founder and having good margins, or are you also on the side of like finding the right partners or knowing how to negotiate the deal or connecting buyers with these companies? Like, what is the role you play in the whole process
Yeah.
when selling is on the table?
Yep. So when they're actually in a position where they have the opportunity to sell, we'll typically play a quarterback role. Well, where we will bring the right partners to bear. Do you have the right legal counsel, the right financial counsel, the right deal process counsel? So we'll bring those individuals together. But before you get to that, again, our big focus is we are the operational experts. So we're going to make your valuation change and you be able to have the artifacts of proof. And so the focus that we have is when we'll do our pre-due diligence, we get a really good feel for how far along a company is. And just like a CEO's role, that's a very wide-ranging perspective, right? We're not going to be the number one HR solution provider, and we're not going to be a Lisanne Murphy that can come in and fix marketing operations. We know what each of those look like, and we know what great looks like. And so in that situation, we think about operationally, how do you look at those functions? How are you preparing for that? Do you have an expectations framework? Like a lot of people, most CEOs got into the business because they were great at something. And people want their perspective because they are great. But they didn't necessarily get into it to run an entire business and be an expert in each of the other functions that are required to be great. So again, most executives will have these great ideas and they will want to run after those ideas. And so we close the execution gap. The execution gap is that place where, you can't figure out why is my team not good enough to keep up with me? Those are things that, we hear all the time. Or they'll say, excuse me, they'll say, we just aren't executing at the pace that I think we ought to be. And so those are common red flags. And we look at that and say, okay, what is the real root cause of that? And how can we help that executive understand, like, what they could do differently, what the organization needs to do differently. So anyway, that's usually the place we'll have some hand raise that comes up like, I don't know why this is happening, but it happens all the time. And sometimes the trigger is they've reached 25 employees or they reached 75 employees or 150. Like there are growth ceilings where your business is infinitely different today than it was yesterday.
Right.
And they're not used to seeing that. And what they did before to get them there won't get them to the next stage, and they start feeling that. And so that's usually where having somebody next to you that can be that executive multiplier, double your capacity so that you can work on the business and then raise your own management metabolism. So that way you can think clearly about how you're going to buy, sell, or scale. That's really what the proxy does, is just gives them that ability to breathe in the role and then continue working on the business.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so here's my question for you, but I want to give you what my guess of the answer is before you give me the answer. Okay.
You're going to answer it for me. I love that.
Well, I want to see if I am understanding part of your world, and if I'm totally wrong, that's okay. Like you can like totally be like, Lisanne, you're way off base. Like I give you full permission to do that. So my question is, where are the levers for like operational deficiencies? And so here's my guess. My guess is it's either in communication or processes or talent. So like talent is like you don't have the right people in the right roles. Processes are like you're not documenting clearly like what needs to actually happen. And so there's just a lot of like ad hoc intuition going on. And then communication is it's like, yeah, like you have all these ideas in your head, but you're not adequately communicating. So that's my guess in terms of like what are the levers that you work on your pull. But I would love, again, your proxy, not me. So I want to know like what are the operational levers that need to be pulled in these situations with these companies?
Yeah, that's everything you just said is absolutely correct. And when you say communications, it's a really big word, right? Or you say process, that's a really big word because it encompasses a lot of different things. And so we kind of break it down by whether you're in the mode of operating the business and improving your operations, or you've elevated above that and you're focusing on leading the business. And so when you get to the point that you're operating, leading, transforming, so that's next stage. You want to take on those initiatives that are going to build future value and beat competition, and then scaling the business. That's preparation for M&A. And so those are the stages we look at, but what you just brought up are the things that are core and foundational, and that's operating the business. So what we typically do when we start working with a client is do they have a business operating system of some kind? We don't care if it's EOS or if it's OKRs or service profit chain, or it doesn't really matter. The point is there a discipline in how the leadership is being managed? And then is there a management accountability system? That's process. That's what you were just talking about. But not just understanding my key processes. When my management team is working, or when I, as a CEO, am passing information to somebody, is there an accountability system that makes sure they follow through? And then the other huge piece of it is enterprise metrics. Does the organization understand how to manage to numbers? And so those are the big three that we look at in operating the business, is typically where we start, because most organizations have some opportunity to improve those things.
Interesting. So you kind of like, are you like shoring up the foundation before moving to that
typically.
like the leadership and transformational
Yep.
area.
Yeah, because once you get past that, then you start thinking about the quality of the lead team, right? Because if I brought somebody in who's fantastic, and yeah, I love this analogy, like, I keep bringing house plants home, and I kill them all the time. And so if that happens repeatedly, you can't blame the house plant. Like, I clearly don't know what I'm doing. I'm not watering it. I don't give it the right amount of sunlight or too much. So the environment is the problem. And so if you don't have those things I just talked about right, you'll hear from outside friends and experts and your own personal advisory board. They'll say, well, you need a great CFO. The CFO might not be the issue. There may not be room for the CFO to be able to come in and do what they do and do it well. So that's really what we focus on, is like, how do we make sure the structure is great and the environment is right so that when you bring that house plant in, it thrives.
Thrives. I love that. Now, are you mostly working in a consultative role, or do you actually do you put people in place? Like you'll
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's really what makes Proxy unique. There's a ton of consulting firms out there, right? And you can join an advisory group, and there's all kinds of, nobody is shy on advice. There's tons of it out there. What we find is the challenge is execution. Like, again, I talked about the execution gap, but we really believe in that. So what we do is we embed uh, an integrator and a strategist in every organization that we work with. And that becomes the executive multiplier. So it's someone who can see from a 30,000 foot view, but someone who can also navigate between the trees and get work done. So, like I said, most CEOs, they have great ideas. They're not short on those. They have tons of people giving them input, but that input doesn't take into account like that one staff member and what that staff member does to the culture. And they can't necessarily get direct feedback that's really valuable. And even consultants come in for a point in time and fix what's supposedly a root issue, but it's usually that they're just fixing a fire. And so our belief is we put this proxy pairing in place with a strategist and an integrator so that we can work with someone over time in the organization at a much more affordable and consistent rate so that they can know that they're really solving the problem.
So is it kind of is it like a fractional COO type situation? And
Yeah, it's pretty funny. When we first started, we went out as a remote chief of staff, and we spent the entire time talking to everybody about what a chief of staff was because nobody got it. And even and then some people would go, oh, it's like a COO. And we would go, fine,
fine,
whatever
whatever
you,
you want to call it, it's
and,
gonna
and
work.
yeah, the point that we got to was just recognizing like, it doesn't matter. And if you start thinking about it in terms of your structure and your organization, that's the wrong mindset. The right mindset is what needs to get done, at what pace, and what will have the most impact. And so that's what we have identified as, being an executive multiplier is literally we sit right next to the executive and we help them turn their vision into reality.
I love it so much.
Yeah. So it's really just about execution because I think, nobody's short of good ideas.
Yeah. So do you have like an integrator that works in a handful of companies across the business, or like
Yeah, it depends on what degree we work with the company. And so at times they may say, like, look, we want that person pretty much 24/7. The reality is they probably don't. Like one person working all the time moves at a pace where their management metabolism cannot absorb that much change. So what we look at is what is the exact right balance between a strategist and an integrator to be able to really make impactful change over time. And so, there might be times when one of our proxies is heavily, heavily focused on an initiative and a business need, but then it moves into a functional tactical level where it's like, I got to roll that out and I have to measure whether or not that worked. And so we don't really manage by hours just because I think that's a broken consulting model. I think it makes a lot more sense to look at throughput of initiatives. So we look at management metabolism. What is the organization capable of absorbing and managing in change?
That I love that from a metabolism framework. That's so good. I love it. Okay, this is fantastic. So, and tell me what, because there's a lot of areas that like you cover. So like what are you personally like most passionate about? Like what area where you're like, "Oh my gosh, like when it's time to get into this aspect of the company, like that's where speaking of metabolism, your saliva glands start to."
I get all excited. Yeah, so I'm a strategist, right? If I look at Clifton Strength Finder and the 4 categories, like 4 of my top 5 strengths are strategy related. And
What are they?
so
Just enough curiosity, because I've got
I
I've got 3 strategies. So,
yeah, so futurist, gosh darn it, now you're gonna I'll come back to it.
okay.
Um,
Futuristic is one of mine
but
too, by the
yeah,
way.
they are, but they are all about being able to absorb lots of different information, think about and consolidate that in something that will really make an impact. And so for me, I know where I work exceptionally well. So if a company has like they're struggling with big strategic change, I know I'm probably better from a strategist perspective in that kind of an environment. If I were struggling with a lead team and changing functions and improving my functional leadership, we might have a different strategist who's better at that. If it may be like a culture environment issue, it's a different strategist, right? And so the beauty of the proxy pairing is our ability to keep continuity with the integrator who is working the day to day, right? They are. I once had somebody ask us, "Do you guide or drive?" And we were like, "Yes." So the strategist will help guide with the executive, but the integrator drives every day. And so the beauty of having that pairing is like I know my strengths, I know what I'm good at, but when I work with a company for 6 months or a year, they might get to a point where we go, okay, now I have this other challenge and we can do that rotation and not lose any continuity. So yeah, that was always, I mean, like that's what I always wanted, right? As an executive and an entrepreneur, I was like, how do I make sure that I don't have to restart every 3 months, 6 months, or when I hit a growth stage where I need somebody different at my side, how can I make sure I have good continuity there?
Yeah,
And that's
which is so challenging on an organizational level because of the amount of institutional knowledge that's gained over time, right? To like switch that out. There's like just like this massive stunt in growth because of the learning curve again. So that's awesome. Okay. Your solution is like clearly needful and important, but it is very innovative. So I'm curious, like what's the issue that you have in communicating that you exist and that this way of running like in a business is possible? Like what are some of the gaps that you're facing as a company to communicate the potential of this in the marketplace?
I mean, I'm sure you understand this, right? Category creation is not easy. Like if I'm going out and introducing something to someone that they have not seen as a solution, that's very hard for them to understand. And so I think that's always one of those things. We came into it eyes wide open, knowing that we were doing something different, but we felt like it was a better answer. And so we have done everything possible to make our solution the easiest decision anybody could make. Like we have flat rate pricing. So like there's no surprises. We know that because we're a third party, we can offer true, honest input. We have no long-term contracts. We literally, I mean, go month to month. Doesn't matter to us. You can throw anything at us. We have unlimited scope. And, like, so we have all these things. We even built in a guarantee, so that like when people work with us, they literally would get their money back if they weren't happy. So we've done everything from a system perspective to eliminate the barriers of trying a new model. And so, I think that's one of the things that everybody runs into. It's always a challenge. The other thing I think is, if a CEO comes to us, they have to have the ability to say something is wrong. And that's difficult. There's a lot of ego in I started this company. I know what I'm doing. I'm really good at what I do, but something's not right. And so most people that we find they go look for a point solution. They go, well, if I just buy this software, that'll fix all of it, right? If I just plug in this, or a buddy of mine gave me a spreadsheet and she's really good and she knows what she's doing, so I'm sure this is going to help me with everything. Or I read Traction, and so now I've got this whole thing down pat.
Operations is done. It's already done.
Right, right. All I got to do is make sure that I ask them, "Are you good on your rock?" And then as long as they say yes, I'm good. So, like, those are really hard things to overcome. But the clients that we get are really exceptional leaders. They're great and they know what they're doing, they know what they want, and they're not afraid to say, I don't know if I'm good at this or not. And they need somebody who can be honest with them. Again, like I said, our model is built to be able to stay with someone and give very affordable, reasonable, fair input. So we always tell everybody, like, we're going to be honest. If you don't want somebody who's going to talk to you behind the scenes and tell you the honest input, then you wouldn't work well with us.
Yeah, I love that. But I think you're like, yeah, I really resonate with what you're saying because I even had a realization recently with my own business of just like the caps that I have in terms of like where I've hit operationally, financially. And I'm like, whoa, like if I'm actually going to get to the level that I see myself getting to, like I can't operate how I used to. And like I have to like really admit to myself that like I don't know how to do that. Like I've never run a business of that scale. Like I don't know how to do that. And it's not even just an ego thing. I think that fear is tied into ego, but it's really scary to like be like the captain and be like, I don't know. I don't know how to break through this barrier, how to like reshape everything so that it can support the next level of iterative improvement,
Yeah.
So
Well, and Lisanne, that's not uncommon, right? I mean, like I said, if you haven't done that before, like if you're a first time entrepreneur and you hit 25 people and you go, I don't understand why nobody gets my process anymore. This doesn't work. They don't know that they've run out their entire, personal network and they're not building new client base. And so when they do get a new client finally, it's an entirely different world because they're not friends. They aren't starting from some place that they knew each other. There's there's things like that I just think are common for anybody. If you get to 250 people, your entire focus has got to be changing at that stage. Like you probably do have some really good people, but then have you thought about, do you have a leadership expectations framework? Is there a way for you to easily be able to communicate what your expectations are and be on the same page? And that is something that's easier said than done. But when you have somebody who can sit next to you and go, listen, I watch how you operate, I watch how that individual operates, and I've got a framework that I'm going to introduce to you about how to manage that person, they take that. The client takes it, they own it, they are the ones that are in charge. We just have seen that so many times that we know how to get that in place and the impact it'll make. So we can talk about that. Or we can talk to them about succession planning. And how are you preparing for the day when you separate yourself a little bit from the business? And that can be as simple as take a 2-week vacation, see what happens, all the way down to a structured process for evaluating talent and understanding what the requirements are from them so that you can see them in a leadership role.
hmm,
So there's all kinds of things that, it's very different when you're a 25-person company versus a 250-person company. But what doesn't change is the need to have somebody that you can count on that has seen it before and knows how to help you through that.
yeah, yeah, I love it. So good, so good. So what's a big initiative that Proxy has? Like what's a big goal you guys are working on in the next, I don't know, let's say for 2026. Like what are you guys working on?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a constant state of continuous improvement. And so we've always got some pretty interesting stuff. Obviously, we're doing a ton around AI and how we use that operationally. But I think the biggest thing that we're going to go through is probably a rebranding, where we have done all of the work of understanding our rational and emotional promise and our ultimate benefit that we provide and where we fit and the service models, and we've got amazing tools and partners in place. And so now we're going through a complete rebrand to help people separate us from the original chief of staff to what an executive multiplier really can be. So that's probably our biggest initiative that we have on the plate.
That's cool. So it sounds like you've had enough success and case studies that like it supports, like you said, like the category creation of like you're reinventing terms, right? Executive multiplier. Like I've never heard anyone say that outside of your work, but like you're really trying to make it a part of the cultural vernacular as an opportunity. It sounds like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's 100% right. I mean, people know what a force multiplier is, so we just take that same concept for an executive.
yeah. That's fantastic. I love it. I love it. This is so great. So, and what do you see is like one of your biggest barriers to accomplishing that category creation?
It's that's a great question. I would probably say the biggest challenge will continue to be identifying the real pain point that somebody has. And that is one of those things, like we've done enough research and study on that for a long time. We know that the execution gap is real. We know that most people come to that where they recognize I'm not working on the business. And if I'm not working on the business, I'm likely not prepared to sell my company. Or when I sat down and start having an opportunity opportunistically, I'm looking at a company here, I could acquire them, that would help me scale. I'm not ready to do that. I've got my own things that are broken. And if I bring them in, I just pour gasoline on a fire. Again, that is on the business. So I think the biggest barrier is identifying quickly what is that on the business challenge that you are dealing with so that somebody can listen to us and go, that does sound right. This sounds like the best solution for me being able to get that fixed.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, well, I think sometimes, often, like especially because you're doing something so differently, might be aware of like a. Sometimes they might not even be problem aware, but like they definitely are not going to be aware of like this is a potential solution for the problem, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, can totally see that as being a hurdle that you guys are not even a hurdle, a mountain. We're climbing mountains here.
Yeah, it's not. It's we figured this out really a couple of years ago. When we talk to somebody about what they ought to do, that's hard for them to listen to because they don't necessarily know us. If someone recommends us, our model makes so much sense that people go, yeah, let's get started. And so we've found that like strategic partnerships are really central to us. So we have a whole bevy of PE firms, VC firms, legal counsel, financial counsel, masterminds, organizations like Collective 54, Deal Boardroom, like organizations like that are helping CEOs uh, find their X, whatever they need to improve there or whatever they're trying to get to. Those companies are helping them do that, but then they always come back to the same thing. And they're like, that's cool story, bro. Thanks for all the info. I have to actually execute this.
Yeah,
And then they're very kind and they go, you really ought to have a proxy.
yeah. And do you have particular industries that you guys work in or have gravitated towards?
Yeah, that's a great question. Operational excellence is universal, right? But we have had a tendency to focus for the most part on service firms in some capacity. That's usually a great thing. And the reason for that is because they're very people based, and people creates complexity. And so we can usually make a really, really big impact. So law firms, accounting firms, marketing and advertising agencies, digital agencies, those are all major, major groups. But we have staffing and insurance and healthcare. And
Okay, cool. I love it. This is fantastic. Well, Bryon, I know that we could talk for a long time on a lot of these subjects, and I'm just really excited for what you guys are doing, and I'm grateful that we had the opportunity to kind of shine a light on it in the Marketing Matrix podcast today. And I just really appreciate you bringing your heart, your expertise, your passion, your wealth of experience, and being able to articulate really clearly what it is that you guys do. So thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for letting us. I mean, it's been great. And I want to just hire you to be the hype person around Proxy because I love that.
Deal.
I
Let's
love
go. Let's do it. Well, so how can people, we'll talk after. So how can people find you, follow you, understand more about Proxy, or connect with you directly?
Yeah. So proxy.com, pretty simple. Two X's. Individually, I am always available. I love to help anybody who is in an executive role like this and they're trying to figure it out. By all means, reach out. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And the spelling of my name is so odd, like you're not going to find too many other Bryons. So anyway, reach out in LinkedIn. And then if there's anything if you want to reach out directly, you can certainly reach me at bryon.morrison@proxy.com.
Awesome. I love it, guys. I'm going to put the direct links to that in the episode notes so you can get those. And Bryon, again, it's been an absolute joy having you. Thank you so much for coming. And guys, wherever you are and wherever you're listening, we know your time is valuable. So thank you so much for spending some of it with us today.